Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. President Biden's support is steadily eroding among black voters. The Democrats' attempts to manufacture a bubble to hide in and then have their bought and paid for bootlicks tell them that they're not doing anything wrong, well, it ain't working. When the black vote is walking away from you, it's the wrong move to bring in idiots like Al Sharpton, who didn't tell you that this was going to happen, and who don't have the influence or the credibility with black voters to reverse this trend. Couldn't Sharpton and Jason Johnson and Michael Eric Dummy and the rest of these bootlicks the white media has on, couldn't they see this coming? Of course not. When you've got your head up the white media's behind, you really can't see much of anything. Bootlicks like Sharpton know their job is to amen whatever these white liberals say and to downplay the real anger in the black community at having given the Democrats the White House and both houses of Congress in 2020, which we were told is the most important election of our lifetimes. And then, after giving them all total legislative and executive control, what did black people get? We got decrepit old fossils, clowns like Nigga Jim Clyburn, America's favorite sharecropper, who yelled and insulted the very black voters who they needed in order to gain control of the Senate. Now, Republicans never do that. Their base can be dead wrong, and they always are. Their base can storm the Capitol. But Republicans are not about to wag their fingers at them, much less tell their base to just shut up and do as they're told. Bootlicks like Cedric Richmond said that Democrats can't do anything for black people unless they can get back the House and the Senate, and black people shouldn't be pressuring them for anything, at least not until after they get back the Congress. Okay, we handed them both houses of Congress. They said that once they had them, they could start doing things for us. All right, and what did Democrats do after we gave them control? As soon as Biden won the election, he was already going back on his so-called promises, weak as they were to begin with. He said there would be no White House Police Accountability Commission. He said Congress needs to handle that. Then why did he promise to do that when he was on the campaign trail? Why did he promise that there was going to be a White House-level Police Accountability Commission? Because he knew from the very beginning that he was never going to do it. He just wanted something that he could say on the campaign trail that would fool black people into saying, well, we should vote for him. This was a lie that he told, and a big one. Kamala Harris talked about lift every voice, and whatever became of that fraud? You haven't heard hide nor hair of it since the election. And as for the George Floyd Act, you've heard less than nothing. Meanwhile, they got things done for everyone else, groups who didn't even vote for them, or groups who didn't have the numbers to turn even one race for dog catcher to the Democrats' advantage, and yet Democrats have consistently bent over backwards to make sure they got things for these other groups. The LGBT community got a federal gay marriage law. So much for Republicans and Democrats not being able to work together, huh? Asians got a federal hate crime law, even though black people are the overwhelming majority of hate crime victims. This is what Democrats did for one constituency that was too small to be able to turn even one election for them, and another constituency that breaks for the Republicans. They went to work for everyone else and just kept telling black people there was nothing they could do for us, and when we pressed them for what we're owed, they began insulting and berating us. So we gave them the government, and they did nothing with it. Well, they did nothing for us, but they did a lot for everyone else. Now, it's 3 years later, and when you ask Democrats what are they going to give us if we vote for them in 2024, they're saying nothing. And by nothing, I don't mean that they were silent. I mean they actually said, we're not going to do anything for you. This time, they're not even pretending as if there's going to be some fraud lift every voice plan, or some do-nothing lie about a police accountability commission. They're not promising even that much this time around. They think that fear-mongering about GOP fascism nonstop is all they have to do. See, back in 2020, a lot of Negroes went soft in the head. They said that Trump is too dangerous for us to let him stay in office, and that we got to vote him out, and that we could not withhold our vote or attempt to use it as leverage because if Trump wins re-election, why, that'll be the end of Black America. That's the kind of claptrap that a lot of black folks were talking 3 years ago. This is the reason why black people have no power. It's impossible to have power when you refuse to use the leverage that you've got. You cannot negotiate unless you have something the other side really wants and needs. But even that becomes worthless if you refuse to take it off the table unless they do what you want. In every negotiation, there's always one party who cannot afford to walk away from the table. That's the side who has to give in because they will suffer the most if they don't. The weaker side in every negotiation has no choice but to make a deal because for them, a bad deal is better than none at all. Our problem is we keep letting everyone tell us not to use the power we have because it would be too dangerous. That's what all that stupid Trump is too dangerous talk was about. Black people being brainwashed into not using the leverage we have to get what we need, because if we use our leverage, then the Republicans will do what? Pray tell, what unforeseen, unprecedented horror is the Republican Party going to visit upon us? Name anything the Republicans will allegedly do that the Democrats haven't been doing already. Name anything the Republicans have ever done against us that the Democrats have ever undone or ever even fought to undo. What little pushback there has been against the Republicans' policies has come from the grassroots, not from the DNC. The Democratic leadership has done nothing about the GOP's anti-black policies. So what are black people afraid of? We're already living the worst consequences of GOP policies right now, and Democrats are ignoring us across the board. They're taking care of everybody except for us, and they've had years to do anything on our behalf, and they don't. Because they know they can guilt or coerce or con some low IQ Negroes into voting anyway. See, a slave is someone who puts everyone else's interests ahead of their own. A slave will ignore his own empty belly and his own destitute children because he wants to make sure everyone else has something to eat and everyone else's children are taken care of. A slave is easily frightened, not by a real threat, but rather a slave is terrified at the prospect of displeasing massa. And that describes a lot of black people, even among the rank and file, perfectly. You think these Democrats are your friends, and they're not. We had leverage in 2020, but didn't use it. Well, now the leverage is greater this time around, and we had better use it. If Democrats claim that the GOP is going to carry out a fascist takeover, good. They say it will be the end of democracy? For who? Black people have never had democracy for a single second in this country. How can we miss something we've never had? What Democrats are concerned about is that Donald Trump will get back into the White House and then there will be hell to pay. For them. They're scared that the orange man will get back into office and he'll be on a tear and he'll front load all those federal offices with his cronies and suck-ups and yes men, and they'll be using their offices to go after Democrats. Now, if the stakes are as high as the Democrats claim, then it should be the easiest thing in the world for them to finally do right by us and relinquish our tangibles, and to use their positions to fight back against these racist anti-black GOP policies. Instead, the Democrats are showing that they don't see Trump or DeSantis or a fascist GOP takeover as the biggest threat to America or even as the biggest threat to the Democratic Party. They see black empowerment, black people finally getting our due from this country that we built, as the biggest threat. They'll talk all day long about a fascist GOP takeover or Donald Trump as dictator for life. That doesn't scare them to talk about. But reparations, our tangibles, which encompasses more than just reparations, by the way, punishing those who harm black people, they don't even dare mention that. To them, black empowerment is too terrible for contemplation. They're worried that a second Trump administration might cause some of them a few legal and political problems. But what they're scared of is us. They do the same song and dance every single election cycle, claim that the world will end if they don't win office. Then when we tell them that they have to do what we say, they tell us that it's unfeasible, or they'll lose the election if they do that, or it's too difficult to get done, and we just need to vote for them anyway. And then, if all else fails, they claim that the Republicans will line us up and shoot us if we don't. And too many black people give in to the hysteria and fear-mongering. It's amazing when someone can beat you, whip you, impoverish you, leave you to be attacked by literally everyone else on earth, and then, after all that, they can scare you to death merely by saying that if you don't do what they tell you to do, then they'll beat you, whip you, impoverish you, leave you to be attacked by literally everyone else on earth. Instead of us showing some common sense and realizing they can't do anything to us that hasn't been done already, instead, we get terrified and give away our leverage, and we do it on the altar of being accepted by the very people who have neglected and attacked us. In truth, white power doesn't have us on this treadmill. Too many of us have chosen to get on the treadmill and stay on it ourselves. Democrats are not going to protect us, and if they were, they would have done it long before now. Tell me, what have the Democrats said they're going to do to punish the GOP constituents for all these anti-black policies that their politicians pass? Or what they'll do to protect black people? They say nothing. Meanwhile, up in Michigan, they're telling the LGBT community we want to pass a law that makes it a felony if somebody misgenders you. Last time I checked, ain't too many people died from being misgendered. A lot of black people have lost their jobs, lost their homes, and lost their lives from anti-black racism. But there's no laws to criminalize or make it a felony to discriminate against a black person, or to otherwise racially harass or threaten or to racially disrespect a black person. Misgender someone, and Michigan Democrats think that it's okay to do their own DeSantis-style version of performative extremism and say, we want to put you in prison for that. But if you're actually harming black people, you're doing things that threaten black people, all of a sudden, well, that's just free speech. See, this is the same thing they did 3 years ago and last year. They're telling you to your face that they're not going to do anything for you. Now, if fascism is on the march in America, why are they telling you they're not going to do anything to protect you from it? Seems like they're on the side of the fascists. They just want to make sure they're the fascists in power. Not a single word from them about anything for black people. Instead, all you have heard from the white media or these leftist activists, the only people they're talking about are LGBT rights and abortion. You look at these white liberals like the ones you see on YouTube, and they're not saying a single solitary word about black people. That's deliberate. That is these white liberal activists saying that they will bet all their chips on everyone else. That's what they're saying. Forget about black people. We need to be focusing on women, which means white suburban women, read white moderates, that is casual racists. That's what the abortion issue is meant to appeal to, white women. And then when they talk about LGBT community, they're hoping that this will appeal to them and hopefully some young folks too. Look at the groups listed in the New York Times poll. Black people, Latinos, women, young people ages 18 to 20, independents. Notice they don't even bother to mention Asians, because there's not enough of them to make a difference in these elections, and they break for the Republicans anyway. But you know who else is missing from MSNBC's list? LGBT people. Not enough of them to make a difference in an election either. But you wouldn't know it by how these white Democratic operatives talk. Every time they speak, the entire conversation is about how the GOP is attacking LGBT visibility. They only took a brief break from that when DeSantis' hand-picked Department of Miseducation put out their pro-slavery curriculum. But again, Democrats dropped that one pretty fast, and they also haven't come back to it since. The single biggest, most regressive policy in American education since the Civil War, and it wasn't not allowing drag shows for the kiddies' story time. The white media, however, has treated the return of racism as a good thing in the school system as just a one-day story, and Democrats have already gone back to lamenting how LGBT visibility is being hurt by GOP policies. It's like I've been telling you for years, and when you look at this New York Times poll, you see I was right. The Democrats' entire strategy, their entire goal, is to cobble together some new Frankenstein monster of a constituency by taking all these other smaller groups and, they hope, catering to them, and then they won't need black voters anymore. They'll put together a non-black voter coalition that will not leave them vulnerable to having to hear black people's demands. When the Cajun Skeletor James Carville was griping a few weeks back about black voter turnout being down last year, they've known this problem was there the whole time. What they hoped was that they could wait us out. That's what they thought they would do. That was their little strategy. Their goal was to ignore us, talk about everybody else, distract us with fear-mongering about GOP fascism, and then they hoped we would become despondent and demoralized and say, well, they're just not going to do nothing for us. They got bigger things to worry about. We just needs to vote, and hopefully they'll get round to us later on down the line, we hopes. Now, with all these worthless Negroes you have in the Congressional Black Caucus, who I'm told represent black voters, and yet the CBC is just as clueless about the low black turnout as their white counterparts are. The CBC members are simply playing the game. And that's the only reason they get so worked up about the Republicans redrawing and gerrymandering these voter maps. Not because they're scared that black voters won't have representatives, because we don't have any representatives now. The CBC's problem is that they're scared they won't be able to get any of these other groups to vote for them. So they need a black voting bloc, because they think we're the only ones who are gullible enough to vote for them without getting anything in return. And they've largely been right. Look at Karen Bass. As she sees it, she's transcended being black. She's the mayor of Los Angeles, and she did it without black votes. So what does she need black voters for? And that degenerate isn't alone. Earlier this year, Stephen Reed, who's supposed to be the first black mayor of Montgomery, Alabama, was caught on audio recording bragging that he didn't care about black votes. Well, that explains why he was able to get so much white donor money, so much white media support, and so many white votes in Alabama, one of the most racist places in America. When white power realizes that they don't have the numbers to prevent black voters from being able to put someone into office all on their own, then what they do instead is they put their effort into choosing some bootlick stalking horse frontman and then pushing their puppet in front of us as much as possible. These bootlicks show as much contempt for the black community as their white counterparts, and that's why they always get fools like Stephen Reed, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Officer Adams of the NYPD, Negroes who just seem to drop out of the sky from nowhere, and yet they walk in the door with all this white political machine backing them up from day one. People who we don't know and never heard of, people with no record, no accomplishments, and who have no connection to us, and yet for some strange reason, these white donors are always throwing millions of dollars at them. These white media outlets are singing their praises and don't attack them or expose dirt on their past or anything else. Instead, these white media outlets are talking about how great their resumes are, how qualified they are, giving them charitable write-ups in their newspapers and doing TV pieces lauding their education or how they're pals with this or that white political figure. These are plants. And it's obvious they're plants, but until the last few years, there wasn't a concerted black effort to expose them and tell our people what to look out for. These bootlicks are not legitimate leaders. If they were, we would have chosen them ourselves, and not some white influence peddlers. If they were legitimate, they would be representing our interests. If they were legitimate, they would be telling these white media outlets why black support is down and will continue to fall. Instead, these corrupt and crumbling suck-ups are as clueless as their white paymasters, because they have no connection to us, and they have as much contempt for us as these white supremacists do. When a traitor like Stephen Reed says he doesn't need the black vote, what he's really saying is he doesn't need black people to exist. He figures, like Karen Bass, that he's transcended blackness. He's found a way to ingratiate himself and get in good with some non-black benefactors. So far as he's concerned, he needs to ditch the dead weight, which is the black community. Now, when we tell the Democrats that they have to step up with tangibles, these bootlicks they send out here try to con us by telling us, but Democrats have already done all these things for the black community. You know who these Democratic shills sound like? They sound like the Republicans. Republicans are the first ones to tell us that America's done all these things for black people, that the NBA counts as reparations and other racial insults and talking down to us. Democrats pretend to be different, but when they send their shill operatives among us, they do the exact same song and dance as the GOP, lying and saying that they've already done everything we wanted, that they're already producing things for us. This is why I keep telling you that anti-black racism is a bipartisan issue. Both of the major parties work against us. Both of the major parties are on the same page against us. The rhetoric, the talking points, the belligerent indignation they show when we press them for what we are owed. Kamala Harris saying, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm only going to do something that's going to benefit black people. No! Strom Thurmond couldn't have said it any better than that. The two major parties' political differences completely evaporate when it comes to us. Both parties get combative, insulting, and they don't just wag their fingers at us, they start telling us what we better do. Like Biden saying that black voters better start figuring out how to work with Hispanics because they outnumber us already. Now, they never told Hispanics at any point that they better start learning to work with the black community. They never tell Asians that. Asians are less numerous than black people, so are Red Indians, or the Jewish community, or the LGBT community, or anyone else. Nobody ever has to figure out how to work with black people. We're always the ones who need to figure out how to curry favor with everyone else. Of course, you have the Democrats and their online operatives griping and whining about how dumb can the public be that they're turning their backs on Biden. Actually, the public is smartening up. They're starting to recognize, some of them, when they're being taken for a ride. A racist Republican who does nothing for you is no different and no better than a disrespectful Democrat who does nothing for you. But the Republican says he hates you, the Democrats say. Well, that's a distinction without a difference. As the old saying goes, the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And that's what the Democrats have shown us. Indifference. Or should I say, benign neglect. Democrats have taken care of their donors and taken care of themselves, but even if you look at the public in general, they're demanding that the cost of living, specifically housing, be addressed. Democrats have done nothing on that and aren't about to because so many Democrats are themselves mobbed up with these real estate companies. Their spouses, children, and siblings are certainly getting paid by the real estate industry. And then beyond that, a lot of Democrats are also mobbed up with groups like Blackstone, who are buying up entire neighborhoods and then declaring that these houses will now only be for rent and never for sale. What laws and policies are the Democrats putting on the books to reverse this and to take all this real estate and make sure it goes to people who will actually use it? Not one of them are doing it, not anywhere in America. Prices for internet service are skyrocketing, and what are Democrats doing about that? Nothing. Perhaps that's because people like nigga Jim Clyburn's daughter, Mignon Clyburn, was on the FCC, and then the second that she left, she went to work for the very same communications companies she had allegedly been regulating when she was in the FCC. Black Americans are being robbed blind, but some of us are finally realizing that no matter the rhetoric Democrats express, the reality is when you look at who is mobbed up with all these companies, you see as many Democrats as Republicans. And these same companies are destroying the black community financially. What are Democrats doing about that? Nothing, because they're getting paid off of it. Black people are starting to see that they've been conned across the board, politically, financially, and socially. Black people are starting to see the Democrats in action for what it is, complicity with big business, which means the Democrats are no different than the Republicans. So, what are black people supposed to vote for? Donald Trump can't take away black people's future when Democrats helped the Republicans to sell it off decades ago. The public see the Democrats shrieking about GOP fascism as hysteria. Are members of the GOP trying to become tin-horn autocrats? Sure they are. But Democrats aren't presenting an alternative. That's why they obsess over transgender bathrooms, because that has nothing to do with the big money interests who the Democrats sold out to. Culture war issues are beneficial for the Democrats and the Republicans because none of those things affects the economic balance of this country, which is something both parties are devoted to maintaining. Well, the black grassroots are tired of arguing. This isn't a debate. We've told them what we require, and they've told us no. Conversation's over then. Because we're not going to get off this issue, and we're through kicking the can down the road hoping some future Democratic politician will finally make good on all these broken promises the Democrats have made. They keep trying to coerce or otherwise demoralize us into going back to kicking the can down the road, but the truth is, we've run out of road. Now the bill is due, with interest, and we're not going to negotiate how much is owed or when they can pay it. They've pulled every dirty, pathetic, racist trick they can to marginalize us, to try to make us irrelevant. That's not someone who wants your vote. That's someone who thought they could make us irrelevant and get what they wanted without us while they just sat back while we went extinct. But it didn't work. This isn't about rhetoric. It's about basic math. Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. Democrats have put nothing into the black community's hands. Hence, they will get nothing back. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Jason Anderson, Calvin Bridges, Morris Bodden, Radia Bay, and Amir Miller. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.